Okay, it's getting late in the day, so I'm going to try and get this done as quick as I can. Here's the heater core from the 68 GMC. It is leaking right there. I taped over the ends of it, poked a hole in one side, used the air compressor, blew some air into it, shot some soapy water over it, saw where it was making bubbles. It was down in there, so that's where the leak is, because that's where the air's coming out. So that's how I figured out where the leak was. I knew it was leaking because it was just dumping antifreeze out of the heater box housing where it mounts up against the firewall. And I went to O'Reilly's to get this aftermarket one, and you have to be careful which one you get, because from what I was reading about everybody else is a lot of aftermarket ones, this tank is too big for the stock style straps to fit. Now there is two different sizes of these. I think this is the smaller one, and then I think they make a bigger one, because I can't imagine them making a smaller one than this. But this truck originally has the small ones, and one of the reviews, the guy had a 72, and he said his also had the small ones. So, at least in my case, there's a part number. It's a Murray 94559. Has the right size tanks, so we're going to get it bolted back in. It looks like it's smaller than this one, but it's really not, because this isn't really used space, and this just has that there. But it's got foam to help insulate it, and so we're going to get it back in, and I'll show some other stuff about it in a minute. That's interesting. Okay, so I ran out of time last night, which I guess gives me more opportunity now to explain what's going on. So this was a really easy change to do on this truck, because some good soul out there before my dad had the truck, I don't know, it may have been him, he doesn't remember, but somebody at one point in time set this up to be changed so much easier than what you ordinarily have to do. So from watching a couple of other people do this, what I believe the process is on a stock everything that hasn't been messed with is there are supposed to be studs that go all the way around. And I think that because if they were bolts, I don't know why everybody would make it so hard and just not take the bolts out. So I think they had to have been studs originally, welded to the firewall. And there's ones that go along the bottom. I think there's two down there. Gosh, those things are noisy. And to get to them, you gotta take the wheel well out. There's no way to realistically get anything under there unless you were just incredibly lucky / skilled / have more patience than me. So you have to take the wheel well out, which presents another issue, because if you have a truck that has never been apart or hasn't been apart in a long time, the clips that clip onto the fender that these bolts screw into will, if they seize up and they're just real, the threads are all rusted up, it'll just cut that clip in half and leave the part on the inside with the threads just freewheeling basically. And then your only option to get the bolt out is you just have to cut the head of it off without destroying the wheel well or the fender. So that sucks. That's what I saw one guy that he had to do. And then, because they couldn't make it any easier, you probably have to have somebody hold the hood up would be the easiest thing. If you're slightly more daring, you could maybe find something to stick into these holes and prop the hood up. But if you have something that's painted, I would just have somebody hold the hood and make sure it doesn't do anything crazy like slide into the cowl or whatnot. Because you have to unbolt the hood hinge and pull the hood forward. Because of those studs I was talking about, you have to pull the heater core box off the firewall away from those studs. So that is the pain and agony that is involved in changing one of these in stock form. So what I believe is probably the easiest fix for this, I've seen people where they just cut the front of this box off, and I don't know. I mean, that seems pretty hokey to me. I mean, because you're never going to get it sealed up looking the way that it's supposed to, and I would say that the way this worked out is probably easier, definitely easier and less time consuming than cutting the front of the box off, putting the new heater core in and sealing it back up. And what happened here that worked out is all the studs are replaced with bolts. So I don't know if whoever took them out just hammered them into the firewall and they just immediately broke off, or what happened. You can see I'm missing a bolt there still. But there's bolts all the way around, and then the bottom ones aren't even being used because you can't get to them. So it's got one, I'm not sure where the other one is. I think there's one down there and then two up here, and I need to add another one in the middle. So the benefit of that is, since you don't have any on the bottom, you don't have to take the wheel well out to get to them. And because they're bolts, you just push the bolts back through the firewall a little bit, and instead of having to pull the heater core box forward towards you, which requires pulling the hood hinge forward, you can just slide it out sideways, and the blower motor just barely clears the back of the hood hinge, but you can just slide the whole thing sideways and pull it out, and without having to undo any of that, which is a heck of a lot easier. And then it's just a matter of, I don't know where this ground's supposed to go. We just drilled a hole and it goes there now, and then plugging that wire back in. And other issue I had is, so this heater core had pretty much the right size tank for the clips that I had, like I mentioned earlier. I did have to tweak them a little bit and open them up just so that they would line back up with the bolt holes. I don't know what the deal is with that, because I would think that they would just fit. I mean, unless somehow they're different top to bottom, but I don't know. So I just opened them up a little bit and the holes lined up. And then I also don't know what kind of screws are supposed to go in here, because this truck was apart for 20 years and I'm guessing that the original bolts were missing, because I just put these random coarse thread ones in there. And they fit with the old heater core without contacting it. But with this new aluminum one, I had to put some little washers under some of them, because they wanted to go through and poke the heater core tank, which whenever you're installing it, you want to make sure, keep an eye on that and make sure that you don't just drive the bolt straight through the tank of the heater core, because then you just ruined it, and they're definitely not warranting that. And you also want it to not be touching, because then eventually it's going to rub a hole in it, and then you'll have a leak and a ruined heater core again. So I think that is pretty much all of that info. I lubed up the whatever door that is in there. I guess that's the heat. I lubed that thing up so it doesn't make so much noise. And then I have this heater core line, which I think it's an 11 millimeter. I really don't remember, but I think it was something like an 11 millimeter. It was metric, but it fits on what I think is a 5/8 there just fine without any issues. And then got the 3/4 one that's going to go on the top. So as I understand it, which I'm putting it back the way I had it because it works, is this is the small one that comes off the water pump is going to be the feed to the heat. All right, so me from the future interjecting here. I hooked it up just the way I said, with the intake with the intake as in the intake manifold going to the top and the water pump going to the bottom. And I read through probably a dozen forums and there was no consensus on which is supposed to go to the top and the bottom. There's just all kinds of arguing going on about that. But what I do know is, having the intake at the top and the water pump at the bottom, the heater works really good. Theoretically, maybe it should be flipped, because the water pump side theoretically is suction, and it's going to pull all the air out of the heater core. But the way I hooked it up, the heater works, and there's a truck at the shop that's hooked up the opposite, and I'm assuming the heater also worked in that thing. So I'm guessing however you hook it up, it's probably going to work, and if it doesn't, switch it. But as it is right now, the heater works really good. Also, what I'd say is a really good practice is, when you install some heater core lines, leave like a good at least 6 inches of excess, maybe even more than that if you can, just so that if you tear up the ends of them like I did, you can just hack the ends off and you still have plenty of hose there and don't have to get a new hose. And that way it'll save you a whole lot of trouble. The radiator was full, but the bottle was pretty much empty, just because it had been leaking for a few days and I didn't know where it was coming from until it finally let go on that last day. And so it had pretty much drained most of the bottle down, so I topped the bottle back off here, and the radiator was still full, so I didn't add any to that. So it'll get hot, push all the whatever air is in there out, and then cool it back in from the bottle whenever it cools off. So far, no leaks, knock on wood. Everything's pretty good. I still have a air gap between this heater core line and the, man, that's already getting warm. Between this heater core line and the mass airflow sensor. And I got the, whatever, redneck cold air thing on it. And another thing that has worked out on this truck is I put this old radiator cap on here just because it was here at the house and I thought it looked cool. But it doesn't actually seal up and hold pressure. So pretty much just the only pressure on the hoses is just from the water pump floating antifreeze, which is probably why I only had a small leak instead of a catastrophic one. So it hasn't caused any overheating problems, so I'm not really gonna mess with it. Because I kind of like the peace of mind of knowing that the hoses have a little less stress on them. Yep, so far no leaks. I think everything's good. Just the smell of antifreeze burning off the headers. So I think we'll call this one good.